to protect their daughter. The parents locked her inside a machine barely 10 square meters wide. Even when delivering supplies each day, they would always stay far away. No physical contact was allowed at all. Because the daughter was born with respiratory failure, she could only breathe air filtered by the purification chamber. They thought she'd be stuck in this coffin for life. But then something unexpected happened. That day the chamber suddenly lit up. Even scarier, they saw through the glass a yellow gas suddenly pouring into the streets, and all that gas was being released from the city's sewer system. Anyone who inhaled it collapsed instantly. The father, who was outside, was completely stunned. But before he could even take a step, a much larger gas cloud came rushing toward him. In just a blink, it was already right in front of him. The streets descended into total chaos. The man ran for his life toward home. When he got there, he quickly pulled his wife away from the window. The next second, the gas cloud blurred the glass, and it seeped into the house through every crack. Thankfully, the daughter was protected by the chamber. The man switched it to power-saving mode, then grabbed his wife and rushed to escape. Seeing the gas surging up the building, they had no choice but to run to the higher floors. Eventually, they made it to the rooftop. An elderly couple lived there. They kindly let them in without hesitation. The mother quickly grabbed the radio to ask how her daughter was. Once she knew everything was fine, she finally let out a sigh of relief. They stepped out onto the balcony, looking at the horror beneath their feet. They were speechless. But that wasn't even the worst part. The man climbed up to the roof and looked out across the city. All he saw was a blanket of toxic fog. It looked like paradise, but it was a death trap. The poison had knocked out power across the city. Though the girl was fine inside the chamber, the backup battery wouldn't last the night, so the man planned to hold his breath and go downstairs to swap the battery. He stepped into the hallway and tested a wisp of smoke. The gas was colorless and odorless, but definitely toxic. It would take 15 minutes for a full round trip. No one could hold their breath that long. Then he remembered. An old man downstairs always kept oxygen tanks at home. To save his daughter, he decided to climb down the pipe and risk it. As he reached the fog, he took one deep breath, then held it tight. Soon he reached the right floor, broke the window and got inside. Just as he started looking, he saw someone lying on the ground. He rushed over and realized it was the old man, but he was already dead. The man didn't have time to grieve. He was about to run out of breath himself. Worse yet, the oxygen tank the old man always carried was nowhere to be found. Panic set in. He turned on his flashlight and searched everywhere, but after tearing the place apart, still nothing. Just as he was about to pass out, he finally found a tank in the corner. He wasted no time, strapped on the mask, twisted the valve, and took a deep breath just in time. Once he caught his breath, he packed an extra tank, but just as he was leaving, he heard a sound from the bedroom. Driven by curiosity, he grabbed a hammer and opened the door, only to find a small dog. Strangely, the dog was perfectly fine, and even wagging its tail. Could animals be immune to the gas? But then he saw something that crushed that theory. The mother dog was already dead. Though confused, he didn't have time to think. He rushed back home and swapped in the backup battery for his daughter. He also brought some supplies to find more batteries. He went downstairs again. The silent streets were now filled with corpses. Seeing them foaming at the mouth, he instinctively tightened his mask, then crawled under a car and collected several extra batteries. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a whistle. Curious, he followed the sound and saw a large group passing by. He stepped forward and asked. Turns out they were a military rescue unit. The entire city had fallen. The top officials ordered a sweep before sealing off the zone. The captain noticed his worn-out tank and gave him a fresh bottle of pure oxygen, then told him to follow the team. But the man refused to go. His family was still back home. The captain had no choice but to leave. Just then the man called out and asked for another oxygen kit. He explained his daughter's condition. The gear was extremely expensive, but in the end, the captain gave him another set. When the man got back, he was horrified to see the gas was still rising. They couldn't stay here much longer. They had to take their daughter and leave, but the only way she could survive outside was with a spacesuit, and it was stored at a lab in the city center. Desperate to save her, the couple decided to go find the suit. When the daughter heard they were going, she begged them to check on her friend. He had the same illness, and his parents were rarely home. The couple refused instantly. In times like this, they had no obligation to help someone else's kid.
C'était l'inverse. T'aimerais pas que ses parents le fassent pour moi?
Left speechless, they finally agreed to check in on the boy, but when they got to his house, there was no one inside. Running low on oxygen, they didn't have time to think. Soon they arrived at the lab and found the suit. Just as they were leaving with the case, the lab suddenly exploded. Luckily they regained consciousness, but the man found himself gasping for air. His oxygen line had snapped. Now there was only one tank. They had to share it, taking turns to breathe while dragging the heavy suit. They climbed step by step until finally they reached the rooftop. But even this last tank was almost empty. If this kept up, they'd both die. So the man told his wife to go back first. He'd find another way home. The wife was reluctant. She knew without a tank, he wouldn't survive. But thinking of their daughter, she held back her tears and left, not knowing it would be their final goodbye. To save oxygen, the woman sprinted through the streets, but even that wasn't enough. She had to drop the tank and hold her breath, dragging the case up to the top floor. Luckily, she made it back in time, but what she saw next was even more crushing than the gas. The suit was ruined in the explosion. It had a huge hole. All their effort was for nothing. She collapsed in despair. Meanwhile, the man was hurrying back across the rooftops when he saw a dead body. The long trail of blood clearly showed it was a murder. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. Someone had definitely lived there. There was food and oxygen tanks. He looked around carefully, and after making sure no one was around, he picked up the tank and got ready to leave. But just as he reached the door, a man in a police uniform walked in and ordered him to drop the tank, but the man could tell it didn't belong to him. This cop had stolen it and killed for it. Exposed, the cop stopped pretending. He slowly reached for his gun, but the man acted first, strapped on his mask, and shoved the cop into the gas. They fought fiercely. The gun fell to the floor. The cop lunged for it, but the man grabbed him from behind. Without a mask, he lasted only 3 seconds before collapsing. The man felt no joy. He knew if he hadn't done it, he'd be the one dead. He got up and rushed back home. Meanwhile, his wife noticed the chamber's battery was nearly dead, with no sign of her husband. She panicked and decided to risk it, to change the battery herself. Staring at the deadly hallway, she took a deep breath and ran into the gas. She moved fast, but the gas moved faster. Her daughter saw her through the chamber window, panicking without a mask, but the mother had no time to explain. She quickly changed the battery, and when the lights came on, she finally felt relief. But before leaving, she stared deeply at her daughter. As if sensing something, she didn't rush back upstairs. She just watched. Finally, urged by her daughter, she turned and walked away. It was a long time before the man finally returned, but when he saw what lay before him, he froze, slowly approached in disbelief, and behind his mask, his face was soaked with tears. His wife was lying there, already gone. He broke down. But the living must carry on. Before he could collect himself, his daughter's voice came through the radio. He knew he couldn't hide it. He also knew he had to be the one to say it. But when he tried, he just couldn't speak. He didn't want to accept she was gone. Eventually he walked to the balcony and told his daughter the truth. She curled up in a corner, too heartbroken to speak. For the first time, she felt like a burden. Then a small earthquake shook the house. The gas began rising faster. The home was about to be completely lost. The man decided to head out again, to find more suits for the old couple. But they smiled and shook their heads. They were already near the end of their lives. They didn't want to take away supplies from the young. He held his wife's hand and waited quietly for the end.
Tu trouves vraiment que tu as eu une belle vie avec moi?
S'il y a bien une chose au monde qui est vraie, ma douce, c'est que j'ai été le plus heureux des hommes en vivant avec toi.
Meanwhile, the man found a top-grade suit inside a truck for his daughter. Fearing he might be too late, he grabbed an electric scooter and sped back. But the fog was thick, and he was going too fast. Suddenly, a boy ran out. The man swerved and was thrown off. His head slammed into a metal drum, and he blacked out. No telling how long had passed. He limped forward with a radio, calling for his daughter, but got no answer. Thinking she had died, he collapsed and waited to die. But then, two shadows appeared in the fog. He stood up in disbelief, and what happened next felt like a dream. His daughter came running toward him, alive and well. Her friend's chamber had run out of power long ago, but they discovered they were immune to the gas. The man was overjoyed, but then, he took off his mask.
Papa, qu'est-ce que tu fais?
And for the first time, he kissed his daughter's cheek. But when the man woke up again, he and his daughter had switched places. Now it was him inside the chamber, and his daughter.
Oui, papa, j'arrive.